All right. This is the day the Lord has made. We rejoice and we are glad in it. This is America 2020, where we're seeing ourselves in crisis. I said this morning that even before COVID-19, America was already wearing a mask. Claude McKay said that we wear the mask, and he was talking about how we have to pretend our authentic self in order to adjust. Isn't it amazing, even embarrassing, that in the middle of a global pandemic, we had to deal with 3 murders in one weekend? The trauma that our people are having to endure and deal with is mind-blowing. Set aside that in one weekend, we lost Andre Harrell, lost Little Richard, then lost Betty Wright. Then to turn on the news, and we discovered that a young Black man is killed in Brunswick, Georgia, killed in Indianapolis, and a super bad sister killed after doing a full day service in Louisville, Kentucky. I keep declaring aloud, and I say again today, that our generation's Thurgood Marshall is Benjamin Crump. The disconnect that we are noting in the Black Lives Matter movement is that this generation regrettably has not made the shift from protest to policy. Dr. King was very significant, but he would have in fact been inept if Thurgood Marshall wasn't running shotgun. That laws had to be changed. It's not just about speeches. It's not just about rallies. It's not just about protests. But we understand you can't fix the system when it was designed to never work for us. Benjamin Crump and an army of litigators and attorneys and legislators around the country are working on the front line when all it is that we should be fighting in this hour is COVID-19, but we're having to deal with corruption, having to deal with gentrification, having to deal with the imbalance of liberty and justice that is clearly not for all. Many years ago, I found myself in Sanford, Florida, at the dawn of the death of Trayvon Martin. And I was dispatched there under the watchful eye of Reverend Al Sharpton and Reverend Jesse Jackson. They had never heard of Sanford, Florida, had never heard of Sabrina Fulton. And we were in the middle of a march commemorating the march from Selma to Montgomery. And we're on the front line walking from Selma to Montgomery. And Reverend Sharpton got a call on his phone about a young man by the name of Trayvon Martin, who had just been killed. He looked over to me and said, "Have you ever heard of Sanford, Florida?" I said, "No, sir." Reverend Jackson said, "Have you ever heard of Sanford, Florida?" I said, "No, I ain't never heard of Sanford, Florida." Within that moment, in about 10 minutes, my phone rang from a pastor in Sanford, Florida, who was over at AME Church, that is probably the space of the size between Attorney Crump and myself right now. And says, "Can you help us find Reverend Jackson and Reverend Sharpton?" I said, "I'm walking with them right now." They said, "A young man has been killed here and we need somebody to come." Reverend Sharpton, Reverend Jackson said, "Well, since they AME, you go down there." So I flew down to Orlando, Florida. I got to this small AME church in Sanford. And in the pastor's office, I met Attorney Crump. And from that moment, we became fast friends and brothers in the struggle. I am pleased and privileged to not introduce him, but those of you who are conscious in our community, you already know who he is, but to present him on this night. Attorney Crump, welcome. I'm glad to have you, sir.
It's such an honor to be with you, my good friend. And boy, it's hard to believe that was 8 years ago, Reverend Dr.
Wow.
Jamal. 8 years, and yet we're still in the struggle to declare the humanity of our young people in a country that continues to kill them and lynch them in unbelievable ways and let the murderers go home and sleep in their bed at night. But before we start this conversation, I just want to say, Reverend Bryant, and you know how I feel about you. I remember going to Trayvon Martin rallies all across America. And man, when you would get up and speak, you would bring the house down in every city. And I said, nobody can follow Jamal Bryant. Yeah, if you're going to speak, you better speak before Jamal Bryant, because you truly are, man. And I'm not just saying this because I'm with you, but I've said this to everybody. You are one of the most intelligent, transformative, and articulate brothers I have ever been around. And I'm not just talking about in preacher, I'm just talking about lawyers. I mean, you really know how to deliver the message. And I'm so grateful that God found our lives to intertwine with each other, because I do think we all in the struggle together. Thurgood Marshall needed the pastors in the churches telling them about the importance of immigration and the importance of letting their children be plaintiffs in very contentious litigation. And then you had the churches needed the lawyers. So we're all in this together to uplift our culture. And I just can't say it enough, man, how brilliant you are, Reverend Bryant.
Oh, I'm appreciative. It's taken me 15 months and I've not done it publicly, but I want to put it on record that the community know. Attorney Benjamin Crump is who wrote the letter of recommendation for me to be pastor of New Birth. And talked to the chair of the board and said, this is the guy who you need to have. So let me say to you publicly, this is the first time my New Birth family would have that information and know that. But I want to thank you on my behalf and the behalf of my family of putting that level of confidence in me. Attorney, I called you maybe 10 days ago after seeing the footage of our dear brother Ahmaud in Brunswick, Georgia. And I said, bro, I know you there. Tell me if I need to get in the car and drive these 4 hours and meet you down there. And you said, Pastor, I need your help because I don't want you to go stand still. I want to go backwards before we go to the nuances of the case. I want you to talk about from your end, under quarantine, how do we fight injustice when our pattern has been public displays of protests, of picketing, of marching? You've done all of that, and I've done it with you over these last 8 years. What is our new normal of social engagement?
You know, Reverend Bryant, if this was normal times, you, I, Reverend Sharpton, a lot of the congressional Black caucus members would have already been in Brunswick, but we know that would not be safe. And so we have to come up with innovative ways to be able to let our voices be heard, to let marginalized and disenfranchised individuals, the most vulnerable amongst our society, know that we're still with them. What my grandmother, and I know when you shepherd your flock, you say the least of these. How can we speak for them in these new uncertain times? And I think it's really what you're doing with your church. I see how you do the virtual sermons now, how you try to find ways to use technology, how we have to use emails, how we have to use social media, because all the elected officials have these dynamics that they use in everyday life. And so since we can't reach them and touch them in person like we have done in Sanford, like we done in Ferguson, like we did in Baltimore, especially you in Baltimore, we can't do that today. So we have to be extra vigilant on social media. We have to be extra vigilant with technology, whether it's emails or telephones. And I really love, Reverend Bryant, how you continue to post not only about the scripture, but about how it's relevant to justice today for Black people all over the world, far outside of Georgia. But it's just so appropriate that you're in Atlanta, Georgia now. because
great.
we are right here, and the matter of Ahmaud Arbery is largely going to be determined by what Black people do in Atlanta, Georgia. Hear me on that. It won't be Brunswick, Georgia that gets justice for Ahmaud Arbery. It will be Atlanta, Georgia. And that's why everybody in Atlanta got to organize now in ways that we haven't done in the past, because I don't know if this COVID-19 is going to resurface or not. And we got to be aware of that. But even if it resurfaces, if the Senate is meeting in Georgia, Reverend Bryant,
yes,
you have to find a way in June 26th to get the Ahmaud Arbery hate crime law passed. Georgia is one of only 4 states that doesn't have a hate crime law.
Wow. I want you, because we are reliving, you know, I probably haven't picked up this book since we were at HBCUs, the miseducation of the Negro. But we are getting just tidbits. Tell us, attorney, what are the key components of the Arbery case that we need to be aware of?
Well, as I've said, Reverend Bryant, all along, this video, as riveting as it was, when the police saw the video, that's not what made them arrest this murderous father and son duo who executed this young Black man who was simply jogging. It was when we, the people, saw that video that we couldn't unsee it. And it outraged us. We never thought we would see a lynching of a young Black man in 2020, not 1920, but 2020. And that rage caused an outcry. And that outcry, Reverend Bryant, caused us, everybody in the civil rights community, in the Black Lives Matter advocates, the clergy, the celebrities, the college students, anybody of goodwill and moral character was outraged. And it is us who made sure that 74 days later, these people were finally arrested for lynching a young man in broad daylight. And so they teach us in law school, Reverend Bryant, that malice aforethought is an essential element in convicting somebody of murder. And malice aforethought, Reverend Bryant, is trying to figure out what was in their intent. And you don't look at it just at the time of the killing, but you can look at it in the full context of the situation. And so the real question, Reverend Bryant, is what was the intent of Gregory McMichaels and Travis McMichaels when they grabbed this shotgun and this .357 Magnum, and they jumped in their pickup truck and they went to confront this young Black man who was simply jogging that afternoon? I don't think it was good intent. I think it was evil intent. And I think that's the crux of the matter when you look at this case, because they're gonna try all those old tricks on us, Reverend Bryant. Stand your ground, citizens arrest, self-defense, all this crap. But we gotta be intelligent enough to argue if the shoe was on the other foot. They will be trying to say, what was our intent when we first started this lynch mob hunting party?
Tell me, I can't help but replay it in my head. Tell me, what is the distinguishing difference between this case and the Trayvon Martin case?
Wow. And you know, because you lived it right there with me and Natalie Jackson Rail, and Tracy and Sabrina, Trayvon's parents. I'll do this and maybe let me go through about 2 minutes, show the eerie similarities between it, and then there is a great distinction.
All right.
The similarities between Trayvon Martin and Ahmaud Arbery are both of them were murdered in February. Trayvon, February 26, 2012, and Ahmaud Arbery, February 23rd, 2020.
Wow.
If Trayvon Martin was living, Reverend Bryant, and Ahmaud Arbery was living, they both would be 26 years old.
No way.
Both 26. If Trayvon Martin killer said that even though he pursued him, Trayvon was unarmed, he had a gun, and that he was in a life or death situation and he had to use that gun to kill Trayvon, and he did it and got to go home and sleep in his bed at night. Same thing with Ahmaud Arbery. They had weapons, they were armed, and Ahmaud was not armed, but they said it was a life or death situation. They killed him, confessed to it, got to go home and sleep in their beds at night. Trayvon was accused of committing burglary, being a burglary suspect in Twin Lakes gated community in Sanford, Florida. Ahmaud Arbery was accused of being a burglary suspect in Taylor Shores community in Brunswick, Georgia. Trayvon's killer had quasi-law enforcement connections. Remember Reverend Bryant? He was the self-appointed
neighborhood watch
volunteer captain, and his father was a magistrate judge. Ahmaud Arbery's killer had those quasi-law enforcement connections because Gregory McMichael was a former police officer and a detective for the DA's office for 30 years. Even though he was retired, he still had those connections. And then Trayvon Martin, it took weeks and great public outcry for them finally to get an arrest. And you was with us when they finally announced that arrest, Reverend Bryant. And then in Ahmaud Arbery, it took 10 weeks and great public outcry to finally get an arrest. In Trayvon Martin's case, there was the 911 call of the people describing he looks suspicious, he's up to no good. In Ahmaud Arbery, there's a 911 call, he looks suspicious, he's up to no good, he fits a profile. There's been burglaries in our neighborhood. Remember they said the same thing in Trayvon Martin. There've been burglaries in our neighborhood. In Trayvon Martin's case, you had the local district attorney, state attorney, have an alleged conflict of interest. In Ahmaud Arbery's case, you had the local district attorney have an alleged conflict of interest. In Trayvon Martin's case, it's not until the state police get involved, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, that you finally get an arrest. In Ahmaud Arbery, it's not until the state police get involved, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, that you finally get an arrest. And then finally, Reverend Jamal Bryant, it is in both Trayvon's tragic killing and Ahmaud Arbery's tragic killing, we have evidence, objective evidence of a pursuit. In Trayvon, it's audio. We hear the pursuit. We hear Trayvon running for his life. And then we hear that gunshot that we now know went into Trayvon Martin's heart through that hoodie. In Ahmaud Arbery, we get to visually see the pursuit of Ahmaud Arbery running for his life. And then we see the shots, the gunshots that go into his body. And we visually get to witness the execution with our eyes where nobody has to interpret it for us. We don't need to speculate because we see it ourselves. And that is the great distinguishing feature between Trayvon Martin and Ahmaud Arbery, Rail. We saw it this time.
It's amazing and it's unnerving to see history repeating itself in just an 8-year period. Like you said, this isn't from the 60s or the 50s. This is in the 21st century, and it is very troublesome. On the other end of the weekend, we learned of our dear sister who was an EMT worker, come home, and I can't figure out for the life of me how it is that they go into this lady's house when the suspect is already under custody. I saw on social media, attorney, that there seems to be, and I want to know your feeling on it, that there doesn't seem to be the same kind of momentum when there's a sister killed like when there's a brother killed? Do you think objectively from your vantage point, from your bird's eye view, that that is true? And if it is, why and what can we do?
You know, Reverend Bryant, regrettably, I think we do know the brothers' names more who have been killed in these unbelievable, unjustifiable police shootings of our people. Because when you think about it, Reverend Bryant, we know Freddie Gray's name, we know Michael Brown's name, we know Alton Sterling, we know Terrence Pratchett, we know Orlando Castillo, we know Eric Gardner, we know
Yes.
Tamir Rice, we know Stephon Clark, we know Laquan McDonald, we know all these names so much more profoundly than we know the sisters who've been killed. When I talk about Tasha McKinney in Virginia, people really don't know her. When you talk about Raquel Boyd in Chicago, people really don't know her. And so if you ran for Ahmaud, you have to stand with Bree because she is just as deserving of having us champion her cause for justice as our brother Ahmaud was. And I mean, Jamal, she was in the sanctity of her own home. Where can our people be safe? I mean, she was in her bed sleeping. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Her and her boyfriend, Kenny Walker, are there, and the police who are executing no-knock warrant, even though they already have the prime suspect of the warrant in their custody. All they had to do was check with their department, and there was no need to perform this very dangerous violation of a Fourth Amendment right against search and seizure. But they did it for reasons I would never understand. They bust her door down with a battering ram, and then Kenny, who is a registered gun owner, Reverend Bryant, he grabs his gun. They called 911, Reverend Bryant, because they thought their home was being burglarized. If it was you and you're asleep and somebody busts in your door, what would you do? I mean, they did what reasonable people would do. And so he grabs his gun, he's peeking around the corner. As they come through the door, he shoots one shot. And when he shoots that shot, these 3 police officers, they say they like the jump out boys in Louisville, what they tell us and my coach. They start shooting bullets from everywhere, from the front door, from the window, from the patio door. I mean, they shoot 25 to 30 rounds of bullets. They're so reckless, Reverend Bryant, that the 5-year-old little girl in her neighbor's apartment has a bullet in her room. And tragically, Breonna Taylor, this angel, as she's been described by so many, who lived to try to help people. She was a nurse, wanted to be a nurse. She was an EMT. She was helping people during the coronavirus who had it in the emergency rooms. Her body was riddled with bullets while she was in her underwear. At least 8 bullets. At least 8 bullets, maybe more. And it's so tragic, Reverend Bryant, because from that day to this one, the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department has given her mother and her 20-year-old little sister, Janiyah, no answers whatsoever while her daughter was killed.
Amazing. Much debate and argument seems to be afoot, attorney, about whether or not, and I want to know your legal perspective, Mr. Bryant, who filmed the murder in Brunswick, Georgia, legally separate our emotions and feelings and thoughts. Legally, has he committed a crime in the filming?
Well, I would not say in the filming, but I believe he committed the crime in aiding and abetting, because you can't do Monday morning quarterbacking when we have a video and you gave first day accounts of what happened. He had nothing to do with this, Reverend Bryant. But there's documentation in the police report where Gregory McMichaels says Rowdy cut him off.
Wow.
If he's not involved, why is the killer saying Rowdy cut him off? And the fact that we see Rowdy cut him off.
That's right.
You know, and so I think he's an accomplice. Can I say this one thing, Rev, about the two cases? And I'll talk quickly. If you ever wanted to see self-defense in black and white, it is in the case of the killers of Ahmaud Arbery and the boyfriend of Breonna Taylor trying to defend his home. When they killed Ahmaud Arbery in broad daylight with video, they said self-defense, some kind of self-defense of life. And those two men were allowed to go home and sleep in their beds at night for over 10 weeks.
Amazing.
Now, when you juxtapose what Kenny Walker did when he believed intruders were coming into his home, and that he got his gun out and tried to defend his castle and defend his woman.
That's right.
Their lives. He didn't kill anybody. When he says self-defense, that brother was immediately arrested and charged with attempted murder. He was put in jail the first night. If that's not self-defense in black and white, I don't know what is, Reverend Bryant.
No, I'm appreciative that you are, as they described the late great advocate Clarence Mitchell, you're a lion in the lobby. And I'm just
real. A lot of them don't know who Clarence Darrell is.
I'm just grateful. Attorney Crump is in much demand. He sent me his schedule for the next 2 days. He may be busier now in the quarantine than he was without breathing a mask. Tell us two things very quickly before I let you go, Attorney. Number one, give me the date again that you said that legislation is coming up June something.
June 26th, the Georgia Senate will be back in session in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, we will be there. And then tell us, if you can, we've got people viewing from all over the world on Facebook, YouTube, and in Periscope. Thousands are leaning in. Tell us what you need for the community to do in this hour.
With Breonna Taylor, what we really need is everybody to continue to call, email, and reach out on social media to the Democratic governor of the state of Kentucky and the Democratic mayor of the city of Louisville, Kentucky. Our votes help them get elected.
That's right.
Let them forget that Breonna Taylor life mattered. And if you ran for Ahmaud, stand with Bree, because our Black women lives matter too.
I appreciate that. Thank you so very much, Attorney, for doing it. And I will make sure that I got buses and troops there at the Georgia State House on June 26th.
Yes, sir.
On June 26th, and anything you need me to do in between that, I'm on the ground. I can't go nowhere right now, so I'm locked and loaded. I'm just a few hours away from Brunswick if you need me to go down, but I'm available. I'm appreciative for your time, sir.
Thank you. Keep being brilliant, the stalwart that you are. Tell my fraternity brother, Tommy Dortch, I can't wait to visit you all in New Birth when the virus is over, because, man, I got to hear you drop a sermon.
And you got to come do a book signing.
Exactly.
You owe me a book signing, so we'll do a 2-for-1. I appreciate you. Family, those of you who are still on, I want you very quickly, if you'll help us in our pursuit of justice and fight for advocacy, if you'll make a donation to New Birth, the link is on your screen. As that you'll do it, not a whole lot, a little bit will make a major difference and an impact. We've got to be a support to these families. And I'm telling you, an old deacon told me years ago, the gospel is free. It's just expensive to get it out. So we're gonna have to mobilize buses and students and young people to do that. And Attorney Crump taught me something very critical years ago. He doesn't even remember. I've been championing for years to get people to register to vote. And I think we were in St. Louis, maybe we were in St. Louis. He got up behind me and said, "Black people, I need you all to show up for jury duty." And so part of our responsibility, when you all get that slip in the mail, do that. And I need you to please fill out your census form. Only 50% of you in DeKalb County have filled it out. I need you to please register so that we can be a part. Thank you, Attorney Crump. I'll let you go to your next interview.
Thank you, Rev. I love you, man.
I will love you all.